Welcome to the Root to Bloom podcast. My name is Ray Phillips, consultant and co-founder at Root to Bloom. And today I'm here with Alia Mahmoud, who is a Root to Bloom consultant and co-founder of Fouta Harissa. So, hi, Alia.
Hi, Ray. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited to learn more about you and Fouta Harissa. Could you tell me a little bit more about you?
Sure. As you said, my name is Alia Mahmoud. I am from New York City, born and bred, but I'm also half Tunisian, half American, which has informed a lot of my identity and also the brand we're going to talk about today. I am a student of international affairs, economic development, business, and specifically social entrepreneurship. I'd say most of my career has been at the intersection of business and social good. It's always been the aspect of business that has inspired me the most. How we can leverage innovative business models to actually tackle some of our most pressing social, environmental issues. So that's what drives me to do the work that I do in really all aspects of my life. And it's also one of the things that drew me to Root to Bloom in this community.
Amazing. That's so beautiful. And just thinking about Harissa, which we'll talk about today, which is your baby, something that you started several years ago. It just sounds like, knowing what I know, it's such a beautiful amalgamation and just intersection of all of these interests and expertise that you shared, that you have. So, yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about the origin story of Fouta Harissa? I know that you have a co-founder. What inspired you guys to start this?
Yeah, it definitely feels like Fouta Harissa came at a time in my life where I wanted to actually apply everything that I had learned throughout my career. I worked a lot in sort of traditional business environments. I worked in a corporate environment. I've worked with nonprofits and always just felt like there's such a potential to do business differently. Um, and so Futurisa was actually born in Brazil in 2018. Just as kind of like a brief level set, Futurisa is a modern textile design studio. My co-founder and I are both Tunisian American. We work with artisans to design and produce handwoven textiles, predominantly made in Tunisia. But we're starting to actually expand the artisan communities that we're working with too, which we'll talk a little about today. Um, with the intention of bringing like really beautiful and versatile handwoven textiles into the lives and homes of our customers. And I think what inspired it, Lemia and I, my co-founder and I met in Tunisia in 2011. I had just moved there. It was right after the Arab Spring or the Tunisian Revolution. And I did not expect to move to Tunisia. I had just finished my master's in international business at NYU. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that degree and was having a lot of sort of like internal questions about the path it was sort of putting me on in the traditional business world. And when I moved to Tunisia, I was just really deeply inspired and moved by the Tunisian Revolution, by the fact that there was a popular uprising that evicted our dictator of 23 years. There was just an immense amount of energy to create and to build a country differently. It was almost like in a weird way, a blank slate to create from scratch. And so I got really deeply involved in the startup ecosystem there. Um, Nothing kills innovation like dictatorship. And so when the dictator leaves, there's this sort of like unleashing of energy and creativity to build. So I became really inspired and really involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem there. And while I was there, I met Lemia. Lemia's a Tunisian American, just like me, but she was born and raised in Tunis and spent her summers in the US. And I was born and raised in the US and spent my summers in Tunis. And so we were like, it's like soul sisters that were culturally similar, but also lived these like very different but somehow mirrored lives. We became best friends and we stayed friends. But basically from that point onward, fast forward a few years, after 5 years of me being in Tunis and working with Microsoft and running all of their corporate social responsibility programs in country and then in the Middle East and North African region, Lemia went off and did her master's in Sweden in sustainability. And she landed in Brazil, outside of Sao Paulo, and I landed in Miami. And when she landed in Brazil, she had some futas with her. She lives in a beach town on the coast with a big surfer community. And she pulled out her futa like we as Tunisians do at the beach. The futa is a very simple 1 meter by 2 meter cotton or linen textile, usually with fringes at the end. And it's just an incredibly multifunctional, versatile piece of cloth that you end up using for everything from a shawl to a scarf to a throw to a beach towel. And apparently, her Brazilian community was like, "What on earth is that? I want one." And so it kind of just started organically. Lemia started going to Tunisia and buying futas at the store and packing them in her suitcase and bringing them to friends and selling them for some pocket cash. And as the demand grew kind of organically, she called me up one day and I was living in Miami and she was like, "You know how we always wanted to start a business together?" It's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I think we need to start a futa business." Um, and it just kind of was all born from there. We built the brand in Brazil for about a year before we felt kind of settled enough in our concept to open in the US in 2019. And it's all just kind of been running from there.
My goodness, what a beautiful and absolutely serendipitous story. I love the story about you and Limia living these mirrored, parallel, but very different lives, and that Futas and Harissa brought you together, and like it's such a big part of the cultural heritage of Tunisia. And I think I understand correctly, it is something that's quite unique to and specific to Tunisia. Is that right?
Yeah, the term futa is really just the word for that very specific textile. It's pretty specific to, I would say, the North African region at large, or the Maghreb at large.
Wow. That's incredible. And so it's so embedded in the cultural heritage of Tunisia and so unique to it. And there's a real authenticity about futas and the way they relate to Tunisia. So I'm just curious, how do you balance that level of authenticity and with the demands of the market? I wonder how do you negotiate that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that we grapple with regularly. Um, you know, Growing up in Tunisia, the futas are just kind of ubiquitous in our day-to-day lives. They originated in hammims, in bathhouses, and then kind of migrated out of the bathhouse to the home, to the beach, to travel. And it was just always something I brought back as gifts for friends and family growing up. And it was just so always fascinating to me how much joy they brought to people, this like very simple textile. And then I would kind of get to tell the story about, where they were made. And so it's kind of remarkable how something so simple can have such cultural significance. Um, and I think for us, we knew when we started this business that it was certainly not going to be built off of buying futas at the store and reselling them. We knew that if we were going to do this, that we needed to do it in a way that simultaneously like honored the origin of the futa, the Tunisian origin, that brought a new design eye to something very traditional and that had social and environmental impact built in. These were like our non-negotiables. We were like, if we're going to do this, we're going to work with artisans. They're going to be entirely hand woven. We're going to work with only natural fibers. And we are going to bring our spicy flair, which is where the harissa name comes from. Harissa is a spicy chili paste that we eat kind of obsessively in North Africa. Tunisia in particular is known for its very spicy cuisine, and harissa is just kind of on every table. Actually, both of them are sort of this ubiquitous product, right? Like harissa you'll find on every table, and futa you'll find in every household. So um, it felt appropriate to pair them together. And our designs, we wanted to design futas and show them almost in a like high fashion editorial light. I think that there's this tendency with handmade products, especially when they are made, by artisans and then brought into a more of a Western consumer market, to sort of show them in this sort of like demure, like neutrals with an emphasis on the story, and it's more the story that carries the product rather than the product itself. And we are like, we want this product standalone to be bold, to be modern, to be eye-catching, to do colorways that wouldn't normally be applied to these products. And so it's this constant balance of like honoring the baseline product, but also doing very unexpected designs, and keeping in mind that our designs are kind of restricted to horizontal lines, right? When you're working on a traditional wooden pedal powered loom, you're not doing, you don't have sort of a completely empty canvas where you can just like paint on them, right? You really have to work within the machine itself. And so I think that that is one of the things we're really proud of, is we've been able to build a brand that draws people in from like a design and kind of like a modern take on the product, but then still also maintains that essential like versatility, functionality, and usefulness of the product, right? We also don't want this to be something that just hangs in your closet because it's too nice, right? The point of a futa is to use it. And so we're kind of always trying to find that balance.
Yeah, that is just so phenomenal and interesting, and just thinking about the impacts. I think about, you've told me it's really grounded in community in a place-based way, in terms of its origin and where it comes from, even in terms of design and usefulness, but also in terms of the social impact, perhaps on various communities. So I'm just curious if there are any specific community initiatives or partnerships that Fouta Harissa has engaged in that you guys are maybe particularly proud of.
Yeah, I think one of the funnest things about having a brand is finding like values aligned collaborators. I mean, our primary partners are our artisan partners, and Lemia and I spend a lot of time in Tunisia working directly with our artisans. We build long lasting, trusting relationships that take a long time to build. We sort of operate on a different timeline than I think other businesses do who aren't in the handmade space. So our collaboration with our artisans is sort of the core of our work. And then, recently it's been really soul filling to find other ways to collaborate with other people. Most recently, we've been working really hard on a collaboration with a beautiful publication called Dolce Stil Criollo, which is means the sweet Creole style. It's a kind of a public magazine publication that features poetry and writings from around the world translated into different languages. Um, and it's a very much like a beyond borders publication. We came together with our friends at Dolce and designed a couple of t-shirts and our first ever hand-woven silk scarf to raise funds for Gaza. I think a lot of us have been in a deep state of like grief and shock over this last year and beyond about what we've been seeing happening to Palestinians, and we, as a brand, wanted to find a way to make some small contribution to a cause that matters to us. And it's just been such a kind of seamless collaboration where our partners were able to design these t-shirts sort of inspired by historical Palestinian posters, by Palestinian poetry. We were able to design these scarves with, they're mostly like green, black, and white, right? Like kind of representing the Palestinian colors. It opened up a door for us to work with a new artisan. We were like, we want to do something different for this collab, and met this incredible artisan in the Medina of Tunis who only weaves in silk. And we've always traditionally worked with cotton and linen, but we were like, you know what? This is a special collaboration. We're doing this to raise money. And so it's just, I think it's so beautiful to see what collaborations can bring to the forefront, right? Things that you as your own business wouldn't just traditionally do. But we recently launched that, and the response from the community has been incredible. We've raised a good amount of money, still kind of tabulating all of that, but we're excited to make our donation to, groups on the ground in Gaza that are providing medical care. So there's things like that that come out of just the brand values, right? How do we take the values that anchor us as a brand and work with collaborators that share those? And I'm excited too because for the first time this holiday season, we're going to have like a little holiday shop on our website where we're going to be featuring other Tunisian brands. The first time we've ever done that, but it's like there's so many cool Tunisian brands that are doing incredible stuff. Like a friend of ours who is working on olive oil. It's a fifth generation owned family farm out of Tunisia. Tunisia is famous for its high quality olive oil. And so we're going to be selling some of those, some organic olive oil soaps, some beautiful hand blown glass vases made out of recycled glass. So I think that the collabs has been something that we've been leaning into and has felt really like generative and inspiring. So we're excited to keep doing more of that.
Sounds so, so exciting. And it sounds like values aligned partnerships have been very critical. I would love it if you could tell folks when they could expect the holiday shop. I know I personally can't wait. But do you guys have a date for that release?
Yes, it should be up and running by November 19th. So just in time, just before the Thanksgiving holiday.
Perfect. So November 19th, everybody keep an eye out for that. Is that just on the Harissa website?
Yes, it'll be on foutaharissa.com. And while we're mentioning this, I will say that the Palestine collab I mentioned, it's called Beyond Borders. It's also currently still on our website. So we still have some t-shirts and a couple of silk scarves on sale on our website, and 100% of the net proceeds are going to Gaza. So if you want to participate in that, you've still got time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure folks would definitely want to support. I'm just kind of going back to your business background, having run things in the private sector. So I'm just curious, like as you move into like a more of a social impact space, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced in establishing and growing Fouta Harissa? And maybe you could share with folks like how did you overcome those?
I think um, the biggest challenge really is trying to do something slow in a very fast-paced, hyper-capitalistic world. You know, we really do consider ourselves a social business. From the way that we source our raw materials to our production process to the way that we package and sell and tell the story. And we live in a day and age of, late stage capitalism, and make more faster, cheaper, you know, cut costs so you can increase profit margins, so you can enrich the company so that, this is just, it's never been a model that feels appropriate or aligned for us. And the biggest challenge is trying to do business differently in a business environment that hasn't shifted yet. And there are some amazing examples out there of other businesses trying to do this. We certainly are not alone. We are definitely standing on the shoulders of, some great companies. like Eileen Fisher, for example, or Patagonia, right? There are folks that have been trying to do this for much longer than we have. Um, but it is a challenge. One of the reasons we wanted to do handmade futas is because just like in the fashion world, right, the textile world has turned to mass manufacturing on machines in factory environments where the handicraft, where that skill has kind of been removed from this super intricate hand looming process. The process is incredibly time consuming. The knowledge is limited because what happens when you don't invest in handmade sectors is people, the weavers, don't pass it down to the next generation. So the next generation looks up and goes, well, there's no work in that. There's no opportunity for me. Why would I learn how to do what my dad has been doing for 40 years? I don't want to be a weaver. So it feels like a responsibility of brands like Fouta Harissa to create that demand. So if there's no demand, there's no incentive for them to make and continue the tradition and keep it alive. Not to mention that mass manufacturing anything has environmental implications in terms of water pollution, in terms of air pollution, in terms of like overconsumption, overproduction, which leaves a lot left over. And so that's actually how we source our materials. There are fashion brands that manufacture in Tunisia. And what they do is they import tons and tons of yarn of various colors, cotton and linen yarn, and they only use a certain amount of it, and then the rest is basically dumped. And so we design all of our futas in Tunisia based on the dead stock yarn. It's called dead stock, the yarn that's left over. I say that's a challenge too, right? Sometimes it's a fun one, right? Because we design super limited collections based on the colors that are available. And that's like one challenge that we're consistently facing. It's like, the realities of working in a global supply chain and not always having the perfect raw materials at your fingertips. Um, I think another challenge is, finding your people in a crowded market. This is a day and age where every consumer has an extreme abundance of choice for when they want to shop, when they want to buy a gift, when they want to buy something for their vacation or for their home. And as a small, slow, sustainable brand that doesn't have, 25K a month to invest in ads, you got to just find your people. And finding your people takes time, and building that community takes time. And I think when we first started the brand, it was like, we gotta hurry, you gotta make these numbers, and we should be here already. And then just kind of slowing down and being like, no, like if it takes more time to find our community, but that community will stick with us and follow the story of the brand and evolve with us, it for us is more aligned than, just kind of getting clicks, getting eyeballs, getting add to carts, getting customer acquisition, right? It's again that shift in mindset, but it is a challenge. Like any small brand you'll talk to, getting sales in this market in this day and age is a challenge if you don't have a massive marketing budget. And then like the last challenge I'll cite is like we live in a very complicated world right now. I think there was a time, decades ago where you could have a business that sort of operated in a silo, like in a bubble that didn't have to address the ills of the world, right? You could just be like, well, we're over here selling this thing. We don't need to talk about politics. We don't need to talk about war. We don't need to talk about the rights of vulnerable folks. We don't have to do any of these things. And like, that's just not the world we live in anymore for good reason. Business does play a role, just like education plays a role, just like government plays a role, just like nonprofits play a role. Business, we are a stakeholder in society. And so, we launched this business right before COVID. And COVID was a thing. It was a real challenge to navigate. All of a sudden, all of the brick and mortar stores became online brands. We've always been an e-commerce first brand, but the landscape became super competitive. mean, not to mention the genocide we've been witnessing over the last year, or the election cycle that we are still reeling from. All of these things impact the way that we show up, and how we show up and the decisions that we make. So that's definitely something that cannot fall to the wayside or be like, oh, well, we're just not going to talk about that. Like when you decide you want a values aligned brand and something that represents who we are as co-founders, we can't just ignore those things and we have to engage meaningfully.
Wow, that's amazing. So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say, it's like you want to preserve cultural practices, you want to consider and be responsible for the environmental impact that could manifest. You have to consider the political economy. You want to have meaningful engagement and you want to honor local communities and you want to make sales, you
Yeah,
know? So
exactly. That's
I mean,
all.
so that's it's just really like you said, it's a different time in our world that people are going businesses, and I'm just curious, like what does scale, what does profit look like? How are you engaging with building new models of success, considering that you have all of this intentionality to do business differently?
That is the $1 million question. You know, that is the question that we're still trying to figure out what that looks like for us. I think what we do know is what we don't want it to look like. And what we're trying to do is to build new models. And those have, I think, yet to emerge fully. But what does feel very true to us is that the traditional way of doing business historically, by kind of mimicking what we've considered to be as a society, large, successful, scalable corporations have also at the same time historically led to the severe exploitation of humans and destruction of the planet. And so it's like it's been this kind of unraveling for me lately, kind of an unlearning of everything that I was ever taught as somebody who, I was raised in the era of like poverty alleviation and humanitarian aid and economic development and emerging markets. And it's like now, now that I'm running this business, it's like, well, development according to whom? Emerging to what? Right? Like these concepts of like moving more traditional societies up the supply chain, like up the supply chain so that they're further away from the earth and now using technology and machines because that in our eyes means they're further developed. Meanwhile, those developments are what have led to the climate crisis and to workers not being paid a fair living wage, right? So it's like it's really deconstructing all these models that we've been, at least for me, in this international business education that I had, in this development education I had, is like I actually don't want to follow in those footsteps. And you look around and you're looking for examples. And there are a few out there that are also, trying to tackle this challenge. So I don't know what it looks like fully yet, but what I do know is that the only way that we can show up is in a way that's authentic. And authentic means leaving the Arabic writing in our logo. I mean, I will never forget when we first launched the amount of advice that I got from different business mentors, like, maybe you should change your name, because if like you're trying to appeal to a wider American market, like people don't know what Fouta Harissa means. Or I once had the opportunity to like talk to somebody about like a larger wholesale account of like making a bunch of futas for a potential client. And this person saying, like maybe if you remove the Arabic writing from your tag, you might be able to unlock more market share or whatever. And when you're a newbie and you're just starting out, you're like, oh my God, like am I alienating people? Is this a liability for the brand? Um, somehow during the genocide, I felt like having Arabic writing somewhere was like some sort of political statement when it's like just our language, it's literally just like a language. And so I think we realize that we cannot be everything for everyone, and we won't be, and that's okay. And like leaning into that authenticity, leaning harder into our culture and being like, all right, you don't know what futa is? Let's tell you. You don't know where Tunisia is? Let me talk to you about it. You want to know what harissa is? You want to try some? Great. Like, and just kind of continuing to chart our own path and understand that scale is this like kind of this sexy word in the traditional business industry of like what it means. It kind of equates to success. But what does it look like to scale sustainably and slowly and authentically and do it by creating value for customers that believe in what it is that you're trying to build. And so that's what we're going to keep doing and hope that kind of growth can organically come along with it.
Wow, incredibly powerful. And I just love and appreciate you and Lemia's focus on sustainability, not only through materiality and the way you recycle and repurpose some of those textiles and threads, but also the things like a living wage, like things that you would think are so basic. But as I'm learning in life, the basics aren't so basic. So I think it's
Yeah.
just fantastic, the approach and the vision that you have. And I just am curious to ask, you know, like kind of impact wise, like what is the impact that you hope to have on the world through Fouta Harissa? Of course, there's sustainability. We talked about preserving, certain cultural practices, et cetera. But, just if you could give us a meta picture of what you hope that impact will be.
Yeah, I think that preservation of culture is a big one. Maintaining these weaving traditions, keeping them alive, creating more demand for them, creating a greater understanding and respect for the skill and the talent. Um, I always say, when we're pricing things or when we're thinking about living wage, you know how when you hire like an expert consultant, people won't bat an eye at their hourly rate because it's like, well, this is an experienced expert who's going to come in and advise me. But then when it comes to buying a product, we don't kind of assign the same level of value to the skill and the experience and the expertise. And it's like when I see the work that these artisans do, it's something I could never do. I mean, it's a talent that they've been honing for decades. And so I think just that assigning that proper value in the way that we're not only paying a living wage, but being directly involved with them. So like being present at the workshops, understanding their working environments, making sure that they have the proper working environments, like higher than living wage, that they have the flexibility to do their work and also be with their families. And also, some of them are also, they cultivate their olive groves during different seasons, right? So just creating a more symbiotic relationship with our artisans, I think, is a huge piece of that impact that we're trying to have. And also, like maintaining our identity through these textiles. Like it is directly linked to our historical identity, to our cultural identity. I think also from an environmental's perspective, I already talked about how just weaving on a manual loom, right? There's no electricity consumption, there's no water consumption in the process. It is entirely human powered. We have a video on our website on the homepage. If you're curious to see what I'm talking about, it's pretty remarkable. And then the third one is raw materials, I would say, is the biggest, I guess, frontier for us right now. Whenever you're bringing something new into the world, you have to think about like what products, like what are the raw materials that are going into building this new product. And up until now, we've been working in Tunisia, where the best case scenario for our sustainability is upcycling yarn that would otherwise be thrown away. We're not growing anything new, we're not creating anything new, not spinning it, we're not dyeing it. We're kind of finding it in its final state of thread. But our research over the last few years has led us to kind of some exciting new opportunities. And we're going to be launching a collection next year for the first time, working with artisans in West Africa. I'm not going to go into too much detail yet, but we in West Africa, they have cotton and they have a lot of high quality organic cotton that is grown in smallholder family farms that contribute to the communities of those the farmers and are sourced responsibly. And we've joined kind of a coalition of other brands in West Africa who want to maintain this and want to source this cotton in this way. And it's cool to see it starting to come to fruition because we're sourcing organic cotton yarn from like very traceable locations. We're dyeing this yarn in non-toxic, certified non-toxic dye. So you know exactly what's going into each piece of yarn. And then we're working with a collective of women weavers who are going to be weaving futas in West Africa. And and we're going to be making a few other products with them as well. And again, it's so exciting to see how sometimes when you're seeking more than just like the widget or like the final product, right? You're invested in the process, how that can like lead you to new places. Our search for organic cotton led us to West Africa, and it's just been this like question of like, okay, well, but we're a Tunisian brand, and like we work with Tunisians, and it's like, yes, we do, but we're evolving our identity. We are Tunisian, right? Our design sensibility will always be ours. Our inspiration will always be ours. And it's now we're excited to start moving and working with artisans in different communities around the world. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, to go back to your last question, for us, I guess that's part of what scale looks like. Scale isn't just like necessarily like more products cheaper, faster, and more customers as a result. It's scaling our experience to new locations and to work with new weavers and to make sure that whenever we're doing that, whether it's in West Africa, whether it's in Peru, which is also something that we're exploring, that we are similarly honoring their weaving practices, their raw materials. So, like working with the cotton from West Africa or the alpaca from Peru, and infusing it with our design sensibility, our brand, but the kind of unifying piece being always like uplifting the artisans, uplifting their skills, and yeah, honoring the environment and the people in the process.
Wow, I just love the way that y'all are challenging and reassessing the concept of scale and just really turning it on its head. I have so much deep respect and appreciation for that new kind of insight. And to the folks listening, you heard it here first. West Africa is loading. So we will keep our ears to the ground for that. I just want to ask one more question, Alia, while I have you here. It's been so great talking with you and learning more about Fouta Harissa, but what advice would you give to, other aspiring entrepreneurs out there, especially those from perhaps historically marginalized communities who want to start their own business? I mean, any tips on where to start, how to stay motivated, how to keep the passion going?
I would say start with a purpose first. There's lots of business ideas out there. Start with something that a challenge or a purpose that really drives you. Maybe you see a problem in your community that you can no longer just stand by and witness. You want to be part of that solution. Start there by like really digging deep and defining what that purpose is for you because building a business is really hard. Start with understanding your purpose and what you really care about, and designing your business around that. I think there's lots of business ideas out there that are like, let's evaluate like the market and the pains of the market. And, people don't have enough access to, I don't know, cheap paper towels, or people don't have enough access to, websites that are going to manage their finances. Like there's lots of like quote unquote needs, right? From like a business standpoint. But in my experience, it's much more fulfilling to be spending all of your time building something that you like deeply, deeply care about, and is either tied to who you are as a person, to the communities that you care about, because that's where you're going to be spending most of your time and your energy. So I would say advice would be like unwavering commitment to your mission and your passion and starting there, rather than kind of just evaluating things from an objective standpoint. For a long time, we were taught like, don't be subjective, right? That's not business. It's like, look at markets, look at supply and demand, look at uh, marketing opportunities, and it's sort of like divorced from the person. And I actually think it's the complete opposite. So that would be my advice.
Such amazing advice and such a fantastic, fantastic business that you and Lemmy are building. Thank you so much for sharing. If you could let the folks know where they can find Fouta Harissa, maybe Instagram, your socials, your website.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on Instagram just at Fouta Harissa, FOUTA HARISSA. Our website is futaharissa.com. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get a little discount, and then you'll also get lots of awesome content. We do lots of fun stuff there. We put out Spotify playlists for every collection we release. We share travel guides, we share magazine posts, kind of sneak peeks at new collections about to launch, and some like special deals for our newsletter subscribers. So definitely find us on Instagram. And then if you're inspired by this, please do sign up for our newsletter.
I love that. You guys heard that. Follow, like, sign up, and be a part of this beautiful movement that Alia and Lemmy are building. So thank you so much, Alia, for joining us today, and we're rooting for you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.